He's back. Oh, you love to see it. I mean, the thing is, that's I think why people love Yarrick so much, because the thing is about commissars is that when it comes to Gaunt, when it comes to Commissar Kane, in their novels, Commissar Kane, more famously, he's the commissar that runs away and then accidentally organizes a counter-strike. He's that commissar, so he's not a typical commissar. But even Ibrahim Gaunt, he's also a little bit kind of not like he's not like an anti-commissar, but he does things his own kind of way. And I remember he has this conversation in one of the books where he talks about how what is the purpose of a commissar, and he doesn't fulfill a traditional commissar role with the talent first and only. So like he's not like kind of a typical murdering people if they show any sign of weakness or look like they're going to run away. And Yarrick is kind of the more kind of classic commissar, and I guess it sort of proves its worth, because in the second War of Armageddon, when he's defending Hades' Hive, he doesn't have to execute anybody, if I remember correctly, because they're all so loyal to him, and because he's so inspiring upon the battlefield that literally none of the Steel Legion run. So he's, in a way, he's kind of like the main kind of go-to commissar that people kind of think about when they think about the main commissars of the setting. Whereas Caiaphas Cain and Ibrahim Gaunt are more kind of like, they're not, exceptions to the rule type thing, aren't they? Free fans, I want you to go to Steel Legion fans' places of work and put your hands in the cash register, and the money is yours now. Yeah. Well, this is what's weird about it, is that if we have a look at the original Krieg mods, yeah, this is it. So this was the original Krieg design from I don't know if it was a White Dwarf. I think it is a White Dwarf. And that model is literally just an Armageddon Steel Legion model. These are models that they sold up until like 5 years ago or something. And that model is just an Armageddon Steel Legion model with a Krieg color scheme, and of course the skull face that we all know and love. However, later on, the Krieg would of course get their Forge World range, and then later on still they would end up getting this new kind of plastic range. So it's the Krieg have now taken on their own thing, and it's kind of sad now, because given the presence of the Armageddon Steel, the Krieg and the Cadians in this trailer, it does sort of give the impression that this is Games Workshop right here, and he cowardly has decided to no longer produce Armageddon Steel Legion. And I imagine it's just because there's probably too many similarities or something for them to justify it. I imagine it's something that probably boring and simple. But it's one of those things where, like, the Armageddon Steel Legion and the Deathcore of Krieg, of course, do have a lot of similarities in their appearance, no doubt. But at the same time, the differences are why we love Warhammer. The fact that the Krieg helmets are a little bit different. They have got that little bit at the top. The helmets are, of course, World War II inspired as opposed to World War I inspired. And then, of course, the cloaks are a little bit different. It's the differences that make us Warhammer fans. Do you know what I mean? So I think I am a little bit sad for those Armageddon Steel Legion fans that maybe aren't going to get these models again in the future. But on the bright side, if anybody does know of a really good way to convert these up into Armageddon Steel Legion and fancies putting a tutorial online, you'll probably do pretty well. So yeah, something for you kit bashers to have a go at. Yes, chat, how you doing? How you feeling about Yarrick returning? Are you sad about the Armageddon Steel Legion? I don't know if I'd say they're getting shelved, but at the very least, I don't think they're on Games Workshop's mind right now. I mean, the other thing I guess to mention is that we are still waiting on Catachan. So if you're not a model collector, you might not have seen, but the Catachan have had a bunch of models in recent years that were like limited edition runs, etc., and they were all very popular. So the Catachan are still one of the most popular regiments after the Cadians, and the fact that they got Death World, a novel even, but they're still yet to get a proper regiment update as the Cadians got. So yeah, it's just sort of a shame. If anything, it's just sort of a general guard problem that Games Workshop have, because of course the setting would feel so much more rounded out and so much more like enterable. Is that a word? Enterable? If it was the case that all kinds of regiments, you had regiments of like, there were loads of ways to build your guard, and Games Workshop supplied all kinds of kits, and they used to sell loads, but like they used to sell Destroyers, and of course, I'm again a Steel Legion, all of them really. There's probably about 9 or 10 in total, and the fact that they don't do that anymore, it just sort of makes the setting feel smaller, and people kind of get a little bit sad, I think, that everyone just feels like you've got your different brand of Cadian, which is sort of a shame, and there are shit tons of Cadians, but still. So yeah, I mean, without Catachans, I really don't think we're going to get Armageddon Steel Legion anytime soon. Would have preferred a storyline of a commissar or human hero going to find out what happened to Yarrick than Yarrick just returning. I'm with you. So I get where you're coming from. I think that this would have been much better if there was any kind of story to it. I guess I'm holding off for a moment to complain too much because they might expand upon it. So we've got a GHAZGHULL book coming out, I think, this year. But I imagine that will follow on from the Mad Doc book. So I don't know if that will be about Yarrick, but I would love it to be about Yarrick. That would be awesome. I mean, GHAZGHULL is always interested in going back to Armageddon, so it could be there. But hopefully it would be really good if there was an actual story to explain why Yarrick was reported dead and actual consequences to that. But hey ho. Anyone else disappointed that they didn't bring Yarrick back as a dreadnought? As a dreadnought is not likely because dreadnoughts are a space marine thing, but certainly, I mean, you can have him be like at this point, 80% bionics or something just kind of completely ridiculous. That is totally possible. He's already missing an arm, but we'll see. I hope Grimaldus returns to Armageddon. Yes, I mean Grimaldus and Yarrick. If you've not read Hell's Reach, definitely a book you must read. It is they have a really kind of complementary relationship, and there's a very famous scene in Hell's Reach where one of the Fire Angels chapter actually is called out by Yarrick, and Yarrick kind of holds him to account, which again is one of those things about Yarrick that people love, because in the books there's all this kind of idea of like transhuman dread, and this idea that when a space marine's before you, they're absolutely terrifying. And this space marine, when he's talking to Yarrick, is he's kind of dismissive, because lots of space marines are years old. So to them, the Imperial Guard, they're not only smaller, but they're also kind of like children. They're a lot less experienced, etc. etc. And so when Yarrick kind of holds him to account, it's a pretty satisfying scene. So seeing people stand up to space marines like that is always going to be popular. I don't really remember why they kept the first one secret. First War of Armageddon. The reason the First War of Armageddon is secret is, so the book The Emperor's Gift covers this. So that's where, because Angron was literally summoned upon Armageddon, that is information that things might be a bit different now with Gilliman's return, but that is information that the wider Imperium is not allowed to know. So in the Imperium of Man, they talk about this in the book, in the Imperium of Man, people know that the Horus Heresy is a thing, broadly speaking, but the details of that are vary wildly. So, for example, a lot of people in the Imperium, all they know is that the Emperor of Mankind, God Emperor of Mankind, started this crusade to reunite the lost worlds of humanity. But then, like the story goes, the forces of hell despised the Emperor, so they sent 9 devils to battle against him, and the Emperor, to fight against the 9 devils, summoned 9 Primarchs, and then the 9 Primarchs won and then were sent to sleep by the Emperor. That's like a common myth within the Imperium of Man. The point being that the rest of the Imperium doesn't, outside of people like the Inquisition and like Space Marines, etc., they're not aware of the fact that the devils sent against the Emperor of Mankind were actually the Emperor's sons. They don't understand that it was actually the sons of the Emperor who turned against him, and that kind of information on its own would be heretical, as is, of course, detailed knowledge of how the warp works and how corruption works, etc. Because, of course, knowledge knowledge is the gateway to corruption. So it had to be that this caused a whole rift between the Grey Knights and the Space Wolves, because of course the Grey Knights the Space Wolves didn't want to annihilate the warriors they'd fought alongside, but the Grey Knights and the Inquisition were having none of that. If he is a clone, they should make a few copies for good measure. I don't think they'll make him a clone, because the model looks pretty old. Like he looks like he's seen some shit. This is the Warhammer community article. Like he's definitely he's definitely got that. He's had that buckle fat treatment that all these celebrities get nowadays. He's an old boy. So I don't think it's going to be a clone. I can't see too much in the way of bionics outside of the arm, obviously, but Yeah, I don't. Yeah, so I feel like it would sort of defeat the point, I guess, to be a clone, because people kind of just like this idea of this ridiculously old commissar who's kind of still kicking. In the Eisenhorn books, for example, Eisenhorn's like level of agedness does vary. So in some books he looks very old, in some books he's largely rejuvenated. So it depends on the level of like rejuvenat treatments that you've got, and there are lots of ways in the Imperium of Man, and it does vary how you can kind of keep your youth or kind of live longer, etc. Yarrick died, but he isn't a perpetual. I don't think they would make Yarrick a perpetual, but yeah, it's pretty much a 30k storyline. But yeah, I mean, it would be wild if they did. Alfarius Primarch power might be the Emperor's Tarot. I think that's how he spawned Omegon. The Hydra meant 2 was meant to have a great many heads, not just 2. Hydra Dominatus, brother. Hydra Dominatus. Interesting. I don't mind that. The idea that his power, one of the Primarch's powers, was connected to the tarot, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I think that you could definitely, that's definitely the kind of thing I could see them trying to work on. I don't know how well Black Library could pull that off, because of course you have so many writers working across so many books. You need a lot more consistency than I reckon they could pull off. But I like the idea of it. It sounds awesome. Like the idea that we haven't noticed all this time, but all of Alfarius' shenanigans have been, broadly speaking, connected to a tarot card, and that's because of his ability. I think that's pretty epic. I think the first Yarrick model was the best. Interesting. I love the special power claw. I remember when Yarrick and GHAZGHULL emerged as the first special characters, and that was in epic scale. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's one of those weird things where like the new model is nice, but it is just a rehash of the first one, isn't it? Realistically, but yeah, it's more detailed. You can definitely see how things have kind of improved, I guess. And at least this was always this is a resin model, so the quality of that is going to vary a lot when you actually buy it. Whereas the plastic is always going to be pretty consistent. But yeah, hey ho. And of course, he's now standing on a tactical rock, which is the most important thing. They know how to farm the comments and the rumors. Yeah, I guess. It's just like they are farming comments and rumors. It's just kind of, I feel like they actually could have done a better job, you know? Like this is weird, like someone mentioned earlier, this is weirdly kind of a quick way to bring Yarrick back. I feel like they could have if they had just introduced a single GHAZGHULL Angron book before Yarrick returned, would have done phenomenally well. And then if at the end of the book you implied that Yarrick had actually survived, that would have done numbers, you know. Since they released the article of Yarrick being dead, you think it might be foreshadowing that he will die in the 4th war? I don't know if they would bring him back and kill him straight away, but again, like that kind of thing would probably be good for the setting in the long run. Like it would, like the idea that no one is safe would be a good thing to introduce to the setting. I don't think many people really read Lionel Johnson books or Gilliman books and actually think there's a good chance they'll die. So having it so that people genuinely are worried for Yarrick's safety would be mad. Grimalda said, I will die an Armageddon speech. Yes, it is one of the best speeches. I don't think I've ever done a reading of it on the channel, but I think lots of people have done. So if I ever find an opportunity to slip it into a video, I will definitely do so. But yeah, I mean, weirdly, I think the Armageddon Wars are one of the things that are covered in quite some depth. So maybe, like, to be fair, like I think weirdly, not a lot of people. The Yarrick has an omnibus now, which is like collected. He's only like 2 proper novels, but it's collected all of the books where he appears basically outside of Hell's Reach, and so maybe I could do something on that. Who was a character that got a model the fastest since their introduction to the setting? GW want to sell a Yarrick model, but would an equally cool Commissar just take too long to eventually sell? Yes, I guess that's true. Like, Yarrick is always going to sell a lot better than a new character that was introduced, but I guess it depends on how popular the character is. Belisari is cool, Vastor the Arcaphane, they got models very quickly. Those models are very popular, so it's not impossible, but yeah, they're always going to be the old fan favorites, and a lot of people will see that Yarrick model and immediately click buy. So yeah, there's always going to be that advantage. But I mean, you are right that they should really expand upon the level of characters that we get in the setting. It would be nice to have more commissars, more named characters. There are of course so many commissars and named Imperial Guard characters in the books that we just don't really get models for. There are like a bunch more Imperial Saints in the books that don't have models. There are all these kinds of characters that really could have models, and sometimes it's sort of odd the ones that do. Messinius from the Dawn of Fire series got a model, and he's a big character in the Dawn of Fire series, but outside of that, maybe I'll be wrong, but I don't think he's ever going to really be particularly impactful for the setting. And the White Consoles are not a massively important chapter. Like, they're kind of a light Ultramarines version of the Black Templars, really. In terms of who got their model fastest after being introduced, I mean, some people get their model immediately as soon as they come out. Like Vashdor did. Belisarius cool. Wasn't long after his introduction. So yeah, I mean, there's quite a few that get that. I have an Armageddon Steel Legion squad in my pile of shame. Yes, I mean, it's one of those things. They sat on the Warhammer website for years, and they'll sell them again in the future. So every so often, if you subscribe to like the Warhammer email address, you'll know like every few months, every like month or so, they do a limited edition run of models that they no longer sell. So they will sell Armageddon Steel Legion again in the future, and those will do numbers, I presume. They actually did a run not that long ago though, so it was probably a little while away. Do you think Yarrick has potentially returned due to him being the actual King in Yellow? Oh, okay. Well, that's the first King in Yellow mentioned there. No, is the answer to that question. Pretty confident. This is a separate storyline, but hey ho. I mean, it's your headcanon, boys. Penitent Engine Yarrick would work. That would be pretty badass. I think. Yeah, I mean, hey, what did he do? What did he do to get strapped into a penitent engine? That would be good to know. Plenty of tech priests have way less flesh left than dreadnoughts. Some are literally just brains in a jar on a robot. I guess that's true. You could turn Yarrick into a brain in a jar if you wanted to, but would there be a purpose of that? I don't know. If anything, you'd want his head, because it's his oratory skills that are most useful. Or you could do something completely mad, like you could like in the long run, right, for like an end time scenario of Yarrick and GHAZGHULL, you could have the Mad Doc put Yarrick's head onto an Orc boy's head and just kind of like complete the transformation of Yarrick slowly becoming an Orc. One of the also like minor things about this new model that I think kind of just makes me laugh is the fact that like they repainted the claw. Yeah, I wouldn't think of them to do that, because at the end of the day, like, you know, I don't know, it's sort of Xenos weaponry, but yeah, I just like the idea that he was like, do you think it would look better in red? Do you think it would look better in red? I think it would look really good. And that's just quite funny to me. I don't know why. But I guess it's the original was red, so that's probably why they did it. Did people actually think Yarrick died? We had the GW community post a few years ago that pretty much said he's alive. Well, yeah, I guess they did say, it was one of those things at the end of the article, they did like a if he's dead kind of thing, right? But we had his skull. We had a picture of his skull. That is pretty decent confirmation of him being dead within Warhammer 40k. I guess it's just the fact that, as I say before, when it comes to the Terminus Decree, codexes are often wrong. Codexes are not always right. The reason the codex said Yarrick had died is because the codex is not an absolute truth of the setting. So anybody that tells you that Terminus Decree lore is right, you tell them, fine, Yarrick's dead. Is this Grimdark? It seems more Disney than Grimdark. Well, I mean, you say it's Disney, but like, there's like... there's guys trapped in barbed wire in this video, so it's not exactly the most Disney thing in the world, and I don't know if I can find the barbed wire guy, but yeah, and then Yarrick is saying that you're not allowed to retreat even if you're about to be absolutely killed. So I wouldn't say it's the most Disney thing in the world, but certainly the idea of people being killed and then brought back to life, it's not a good sign. It's not a good sign. It's not a good sign to say that, like, yeah, no one suffers a meaningful death in Warhammer 40k. Like, I think that, yeah, Yarrick would have been a character that they could have killed. Even Trazyn, you know, has the opportunity to just kind of save anybody from history if he needs to. So yeah, I mean, like, you know, he can release Creed at any point that he wants, and that's even we don't know most of Trazyn's collection. So if he wanted to bring back anybody from the Heresy, it would Yeah, it would seem a bit shit. Wouldn't Elenius' soul be trapped on the vengeful spirit with Sanguinius' soul? Is it not the case that all who were killed had their soul trapped on the vengeful spirit rather than go to the warp? So I think what you're thinking of is the Black Legion Talon of Horus book. And in that, yes, there is the suggestion that a bit of Sanguinius' soul might be trapped on the vengeful spirit and it kind of like appears as a ghost. However, we can be pretty confident that is not most of Sanguinius' soul because of the Darkness in the Blood book, which talks much more extensively about how you've got the Black Angel and the Golden Angel, the Sanguinor and the Black Angel, and that seems to be at least two major parts of Sanguinius' soul. Maybe all of it, and what's on the Black Legion is kind of a reflection or something like that. But yeah, certainly it's the case that Sanguinius' soul, to me, I'd be pretty confident isn't trapped on the Vengeful Spirit. Whether other people are, it's definitely possible. It is obviously a very important vessel within the setting, maybe the most important vessel. But at the end of the, but yeah, to be honest with you, it's yeah, it's one of those things. You're talking about magic and you're talking about ghosts, and as much as these things are definitely present in Warhammer 40k, there's not a hard science with it, so I can only give you so much confident of an answer. I would guess Elenius' person is dead. That's what I'd imagine. His soul is drifted into the warp, likely being saved by the Emperor, but yeah, I don't think we'll see him again. What is the best cost-effective way to listen to all the audiobooks? So the new way, I guess I haven't really looked into it. Has anyone looked into this new app that Games Workshop is making? Is it good? Yeah, so Games Workshop have just released a new app if you're interested, because I'm guessing they don't like the idea of giving Audible and Amazon a chunk of their money. So they've now made their own app, and I'm assuming I'm right in saying, gang, that your Audible books are not transferable to this. But yes, if you buy them on this app, I would guess they'll be slightly cheaper. It collects all of your ebooks. Oh, interesting. So does that mean my Kindle books would transfer? Because that would be quite interesting. I haven't actually looked into it. Has anyone used this yet? What's your experiences? Is it good? But yeah, I would guess this will be the cheapest way to buy them because of that way. The other thing that's worth keeping an eye out for are the Humble Bundles. So if you have a look on the Humble Bundle website, I don't know if there is one right now, but like if you join any of like the big Warhammer Discords, people will share, and they often have them for like Warhammer 40k books. I haven't seen them, I think, for the audio books, but I'm more of a Kindle guy myself anyway, so I don't know if they do them. But they've definitely done Kindle ones before, where you can buy a Humble Bundle and then you get a shit ton of like random. This you can't choose; it's just random Warhammer 40k or Horus Heresy. Kindle books that you can then download. So that's probably the cheapest way to do it. But yes, if there's specific things that you'd want, I'd probably give the new app a try. The only reason I can think of as to why they've done this is to save some money. That's the only thing I can think of. The audiobooks are more expensive on Audible. There you go. The app is pretty simple but good, easy to navigate. Prices are not great on the new app. Are they comparable to Kindle? I haven't looked at it at all. I think it's just one of those things where like I have so much on Kindle or on Audible that I don't know if I would. Yeah, I guess if it's cheaper, I'll probably download some stuff on there. But yeah, I guess I'm loyal to my platforms, you know. The way I see it, you can absolutely kill Yarrick. You just can't make his death a footnote off screen. It needs to have some kind of narrative weight. I get where you're coming from. Yes, it needs to have some kind of narrative weight. Yeah, I think that works. I mean, I think that the whole thing should have had some narrative weight. I think what just seems a bit shit is the fact that, as far as I can tell, they've done all of this just for a trailer. They allegedly killed him just to have this kind of cool trailer to release the model, and that seems a little bit lame. I would at the very least have had a GHAZGHULL Angron showdown, because the thing is about a GHAZGHULL Angron showdown is that GHAZGHULL and Angron are both completely, you know, crunchable. You could just kill either of them, and yeah, like there's no downside. Like if Angron rips GHAZGHULL apart, the Mad Dot can put him back together. And if GHAZGHULL kills Angron, which I think should happen, then Angron gets reborn every 2 months. So like it's not really a problem. If you were a perpetual right now, would you side with the Emperor 30k years from now in the Wars of Unification and the taking of the galaxy, even if you don't know anything he's doing? Well, I have my knowledge of 40k. I mean, if I had my knowledge of 40k, I could let him know a few things. Do I? I guess, okay. Assuming I don't have my knowledge, would I side with the Emperor? Probably. I guess it's one of those things where they don't really explain what the Emperor did in detail that annoyed the Perpetuals. So Erda talks about this idea of the Emperor cutting corners, and the Emperor, yeah, having like he grows increasingly annoyed with the other Perpetuals. I imagine the Emperor would grow annoyed with me because my brain doesn't work as fast as his. But in terms of like what the Emperor was doing to cut corners, it's kind of an interesting one, because the Primarchs are said to be like pseudo perpetuals, but the Primarchs came later. They came as a consequence, it seems, of the Perpetuals abandoning the Emperor. So what did the Emperor do in addition to that made the Perpetuals actually abandon him? So really, I don't know. Like he perhaps was messing around in some technology, etc. Maybe it was just the gateway to chaos during the Age of Darkness. Yeah, maybe it was just something like that. But as far as we know, yeah, it could be anything. Who was the most important mortal death in all of Warhammer? Yeah, I guess it would be a Lanius person. In like modern 40k, who is the most important mortal character to die? I mean, I'm trying to think of models like Creed or whoever is. Creed's gone, and his model's gone, but he'll be back at some point. I mean, Yarrick has gone for such a short stay of time. I can't imagine Creed will be gone for that much longer. Most important mortal death. Yeah, because they usually have characters that are important to their novels, but yeah, who knows? Yeah, in terms of like, yeah, they don't. Yeah, it can feel a little bit Disney in that respect. Most important mortal death is Udo Raskian. Could be Raskian. Raskian's not a bad shout. The consequences of that, as far as we know, will have been quite extensive. But yeah, it just all sort of happens off screen, which is just very, very strange. The most important mortal death to me was in Dark Imperium with the priest who tried to convert Guilliman and played a major part. Yes. Oh god, I feel bad. I've forgotten his name. Yes. It's funny, isn't it? Matthew, brother Matthew, because the reason Guilliman likes him is because Guilliman likes that he's a bit more chill at the start, doesn't he? Because Matthew asks him, like, why did you choose me out of everybody? Because he's quite young, isn't he? I remember. And so he tries to work with Guilliman, and very hilariously, in the second book, Guilliman actually does meet somebody with the power of the Emperor kind of flowing through them, this little girl. So like a living saint type figure. It's very vague. And in the final book, when Matthew dies, he should get a video at some point, really. And when Matthew dies, Guilliman actually kind of gives him, quite charitably, the send off that he'd want, and he sort of like doesn't affirm his beliefs, but he kind of allows him to die, sort of believing in the divinity of the Master of Mankind, and thereby the kind of semi-divinity of Guilliman. But I guess it sort of fits, because part of the series is Guilliman kind of understanding a bit more about how the Emperors and his divinities kind of working. Picked up 40k Rogue Trader game today. Playing now. Good story so far. Yes, I just restarted it, actually, because I haven't had time to get that far into it and there's a new run. But I would like to do a new run for the release of the Trazen expansion, which will be pretty good. And part of me is pretty confident that that Trazen footage, that Trazen game, will be interesting, because I mentioned earlier, like, we know so little about Solomon's his library, museum, sorry, because it's, of course, it does appear in multiple books, and he actually has a battle against Orks in one of them, the short story. But we know he supposedly has such an extensive collection and all kinds of crazy stuff. So weirdly, that Rogue Trader DLC could be it could provide some really thought-provoking questions. I think Games Workshop will probably allow them to put Creed into the DLC, because it would be so funny. And yeah, it would be amazing, wouldn't it, just to allow that to happen. So I think that seeing just walking through that museum and looking at all the exhibits will make that DLC worth it. But Gilliman does still tell his corpse that he is wrong. Never one to lose an argument. Yeah, Gilliman is definitely a softer guy. But yeah, their conversations are particularly interesting because, of course, I mean, it's one of the main things I think we were all quite hyped to see for when the Primarchs come back, is them deliberately. Is them actually talking to religious people in the Imperium of Man. We have a little bit of the Lion in his book as well, where he, of course, does run into people who worship the Emperor as a god. And Mike Brooks, he's got a lot to cover, so they kind of go through it quite quickly, but it's sort of a similar vein. The Lion just kind of accepts it because of the greater problems afoot and the fact that chaos is about to start killing everyone. There should be a VAT that says Fulgrim clone, but it's empty. That would drive the internet mad. You're so right. I feel like they should do that. What's the company called? Owlcat Gaming. I feel like they should do that just because they would sell more copies. Like, how many people would buy that game just to get access to that footage? Thoughts on the Percentennial of the Damned DLC for Rogue Trader? Oh, I haven't seen that. Is that an? I thought the Trajan one was going to be the last one. I didn't realize there was going to be more. I figured after this they would move on to Dark Heresy. Percentennial of the Damned. Oh, have they Sorry, Processional of the Damned. Sorry, that's a lie. Have they provided any images for it? Nothing yet. Nothing yet. Okay, well, ooh, it could be cool. I mean, like, I'm really glad to see Dark Heresy is about the Tyrant Star. The reason I say that is because the Tyrant Star is one of those things in Warhammer 40k that is, it's from like the Death Watch books, and it's always been a really interesting aspect of Warhammer 40k lore, but there's so little lore on it. And so Dark Heresy is going to be a meaningful lore expansion on that kind of aspect of kind of the Ghoul Stars, or at least the Tyrant Star. And so people are pretty excited for it. So I think having major expansions, especially when it comes to kind of that minor, you know what I mean? That lore from the Death Watch books, or that lore from like little codex references that is really awesome. It doesn't really get novels or anything based around it. I think there's nothing wrong with taking that lore and expanding upon it in a game like that, because, yes, I think it's perfectly valid. Are there other authors that are to cover Xenos besides Mike Brooks? Nothing against him, just hoping more. Upcoming Xenos books. Have I invented this, or I'm pretty certain they announced a Lycus book. The new Phoenix Lord. I'm pretty certain. Maybe it's just because I saw her artwork, and her artwork looks like cover art for a novel. Do you know what I mean? It sort of has that like same with Lilith Hesperax, like close up facial look. But in terms of upcoming books, I don't know who else will be covering them. Let's think about recent books. So Silent King, that of course has a lot on the Necrons. That was written by Guy Haley. That was very good. And I think is actually one of the best. Like, I think he did a really good job with the Necrons there. Like, genuinely, I think that was important to get right, because you don't want Necron fans to walk away feeling like, oh, the Necrons are shit once again. But also, you don't, like, it's not that you want the Imperium to have every win. The Imperium loses, but at the same time, you want it to have some sort of intrigue. You don't want it just to be like, as much as we talk about the Imperium being a damned faction, having every book just the Imperium being killed will be dull. So yeah, I think he writes that very well. In terms of recent books, just on the Black Library website. Okay, so I think so. If you buy these on here, I believe they should transfer to your new Warhammer app thing. So, in terms of the least where the Xenos are like the protagonists, so the Twice Dead King, that just got a new omnibus. That is definitely worth buying. That's very good. Tomb World. The Twice Dead King is really good. Twice Dead King. Darkness Eternal, that is an omnibus, if I remember correctly. So it's a bunch of books, some of which I've talked about on the channel before, I think. Yes, A Million Years, that's Necrons, and... Wait, why the fuck is it Tyrannus then? Anyway, this is just a load of short stories. Okay. Yes, okay, sorry, this is not just Tyrannus. This is just lots and lots of short stories put together. Void's Guard, that's also my books. Grotstick to Mad Dark by Danny Flowers. That was very good. I really enjoyed that book. I've spoken about that before on the channel actually quite a bit. Farside Blade of Truth, that was also a recent one. So that is book like 4 or 5, depending if you count the novella, of the Farsight series, and by Phil Kelly. And a lot of people preferred the Elemental Council as in terms of a writing style, but I quite like the Farsight books, and I'm glad Phil Kelly kind of keeps them because it allows there to be kind of a consistent narrative tone for the setting. And Farsight is a much more hopeful figure. Farsight is a nice kind of counter to the way the Imperium books are often written. So I actually don't mind them, but if you're not interested in Tau, fair enough. Man, there are so few Xenos books. I guess a lot of these are short stories. Yes, Elemental Council is very, very good. The High Carl's Oath was actually decent. Like Gav Thorpe's Eldar books are not very popular, but I actually thought this book was really good, so I totally recommend it. The Red Goblin books are all interesting. Above and Beyond, it has a good Xenos showing. So, again, Danny Flowers. And we get so few. God damn, they really release so many short stories, don't they? So, yeah, there are a bunch, but most things are from the Imperium's perspective. Sorry, is what it is. Two Mode was fine. Yeah, that's it. It was fine. I think that yeah, I mean, the premise of it is cool. Like the premise of it is cool. The idea of it's a human world, not understanding this Necrons underneath, and the like the Death Watch get brought in, and then of course they don't realize just how bad this situation is at the start. So it's all kind of kicks off, and it's the Imperium. Arcs of Omen will be forever balling. Yes, that's true, but you can't really buy Arcs of Omen, I don't think, nowadays. Can you actually get a copy of it anywhere? I don't think it's on the Vault. It will be uploaded to the Vault at some point. So yes, I guess stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's the sad thing about Warhammer 40k is that a lot of the campaign stuff it just disappears, and that's the real advantage of your kind of Games Workshop subscription, is that it does mean that you will eventually get access to everything. Like if you have got access to the Vault, there is a bunch of Xenos stuff in here that will be worth reading. So you have a bunch of like old like there's White Dwarfs and that kind of thing, but you have a bunch of like old supplements and that kind of thing, where even though these are quite old, as in like we're currently in 10th edition, looking at 11th edition, and these are 7th edition, I think, they're still some of the biggest expansion we've had on specific factions. So Homunculus Covens, you've got a Yandan in here somewhere. You've got a lot of like old campaign books that aren't in print anymore. So yeah, it's definitely worthwhile at least checking out at some point. And also, if you ever read Warhammer 40k as a kid, I've got all the Imperial Armor Tones. So you've got the Krieg versus Necrons, Fire Titans. So yeah, you've got all this kind of stuff as well. It's like the things people know and love. You've got the Siege of Rax. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, the Fall of Orpheus. The Psychic Awakening books that will have a bunch of Xenos. Yeah, it's definitely worth getting a subscription to the Vault once, at the very once. Get yourself a subscription for a month. It's like £6, $7, something like that, and have a read through. It's honestly pretty cool, because also you've got all these White Dwarfs from like when you were a kid, which is pretty fun. And even like it's kind of fascinating. Oh, you even got like the Fall of Cadia lore. So, oh yeah, you have Fracture of Baeltan. That's definitely Xenos lore that's worth reading. Yeah, you can check out Age of Sigmar, and then we can try and understand what Pancreas No Work is talking about. That'll be good. I'll send you $50 if you can guess the obscure guards regiment that gets referenced in Death Rider. Hint: they're based on a culture in a continent of the British colonized during the 17th century. The British colonized. Oh God. Yes, the Penal Legion. Yeah. Is it funny how you can find it online illegally, but it's not on the app yet? Yes, you are right. That's the one of you're totally right. That is one of the things about Warhammer 40k and the way Games Workshop behave that is quite bizarre, is that they kind of incentivize like these sorts of activities, in the same way that when they used to make models and they used to have data sheets in books where you couldn't actually buy and make that. You couldn't buy and make those models. So what you had to do, you were obligated, if you wanted to play those models, to look for third-party sellers, to look at look for third-party sellers, to look for people who were doing 3D prints and all that kind of thing. And so Games Workshop weirdly created their own kind of counter industry. And when they make these books but don't actually sell them, they incentivize people to actually go out there and like download books illegally. And it's such a bizarre thing for them to do. And I spoke about it before, where, you know, if you want to get access to these short stories online that are released alongside these limited edition books, you either have to wait like a year. Like, I don't think, if we have a look, like when I was talking about it before, when the new Carcharodon's book came out, that was about 6 months ago, and that short story is still not available for purchase. So if you want to get access to that short story, you have to pirate it. There's no other way to go about it. And if you've had to pirate it, you've discovered the ways of piracy, and therefore the seas of the ocean are available to you. And so you're just going to keep pirating stuff. And so Games Workshop have, like they make a lot of very smart business decisions. And incidentally, I believe their stock price like fucking skyrocketed this week. But at the same time, they do a lot of really weird stuff, and this is one of them where it would make a lot more sense to just allow people to buy your products. I still don't really understand why they're cutting down the Horus Heresy so much and doing this weird thing where it's being cut down to like 9 books or whatever. Because yes, it is true to say that like the Horus Heresy is a really weird thing to read, but it's sort of like the world that we know and love. I think my camera's about to die, so I'm just gonna do some B-roll for a second. Yes, Warhammer, the Horus Heresy is a tough thing to follow, but we sort of know that and love that about Warhammer 40k, and the Horus Heresy. So it sort of makes sense. And at the end of the day, Games Workshop's main flagship series is not something you're able to buy on their website, and that just doesn't make any sense to me. It would like, if they've put so much time and money into paying these authors and paying these artists to create these books, but then they don't actually sell them. And there are some going to be obscure, less known Warhammer factions, Warhammer books that don't get a lot of attention, but the Horus Heresy is always going to be something that will sell. And it's just, the way they handle their business sometimes is so bizarre to me. The answer is the Bushmen of Serica, based on Australia, but it's funny when you guessed a penal legion when Australians are real life penal legionnaires. So I'll give it to you. Read it when you can. It's a little slow, but picks up and ends really strong. Thank you so much. That's very generous. Interesting. I was just looking at that book. The writer is not actually Steve Lyons. It's Rui James. But that's interesting that someone else is covering the Krieg. How did they do? Yeah, that's quite interesting. That because I quite like the fact when certain factions are owned by certain writers, because it adds a certain degree of consistency. And I feel like Steve Lyons did a good job with Krieg, and he did a good job with the Siege of Rax. So I think that it would. I'm surprised they've switched it up, but maybe he did well. Death Rider was pretty grimdark, not just because a lot of people died, but the pure nihility of the circumstances. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that it seems inevitable in hindsight, I guess, but one of the things that was sort of shocking about the Death Coil Krieg books, I think, not shocking, but was good to get clarification on, was that the Krieg weren't as nihilistic, I think, as people expected them to be, because, of course, it just, previously when you have the Siege of Rax books, you have the Imperial Armor tones, it is very nihilistic, but that's kind of because it's like we knew so little about them, so a lot of it was just based in the mystery of the setting, whereas the actual Krieg at the Siege of Rax novel are much more tempered. They are guess they're not working. They're much more tempered. They're much more kind of. I mean, I try not to spoil it, but they're much more likely to actually run away, as it were. So they are very different, I think, to how people expected them to be written. But it was still agree across the board with the writer consistency. Yeah, I mean, it's always going to be. There's always going to be a little bit of crossover, but for example, especially in a weird way, sometimes it's more important for characters. Like Belisari is cool. I think one of the reasons he's been such a good and popular character since his introduction has been because Guy Haley has just kind of created him and taken the reins, and he's written all of his books except like one, and so he's been very consistently done. But at the same time, yeah, of course, we do want to see all kinds of characters interact, so it's just a matter of them discussing things. But the legends go that Games Workshop writers have nearly come to blows as they were horrified by the suggestions of their comrades. But I think that having consistent writers is obviously going to be a really good thing. But the problem is then it feels like, I guess the challenge is that then if their writing isn't popular, like then it sort of feels like a big rug pull, you know, like it must have been a little bit of a blow to like Gav Thorpe when Mike Brooks got given Lionel Johnson to return, or at the very least people were excited to see someone else write the return of Lionel Johnson. But that's just because like a lot of his books, a lot like his Dark Angels books, his Eldar books, they haven't been received particularly well, and when that happens, it's you either have to change writer or you're tied into the faction for a while. The reason the Lions Horus Heresy lore is such a shit show is different people writing him. Yes, that's true. That's true. Like I actually think maybe I feel like maybe Dan Abnett had a vision for him. Like Unremembered Empire has a much more I think it has a much more kind of concisive character of the Lion. Not in that he's like a really good guy in that book. He's definitely very problematic. But I think that the way Dan Abnett writes him is like, oh, well, there are these redeeming qualities about him, and that makes him a much more intriguing figure. Whereas other writers just kind of throw that to the wind, and they're just like, no, just have him be petulant, just have him be a dick every time. And you're like, oh, okay, well, that's kind of less fun. And yeah, that should have been better thought out. And especially when it comes to the reflection cracked when Fulgrim gets brought out of the mirror. Like it was just sort of, it just kind of really took the wind out of the sails. I would love to see Gendy Tartakovsky do a story for the Xenos, but he's already onto another project. He made Samurai Jack, I'm guessing, 2003 Star Wars, Clone Wars, Primal Unicorn, or something else. Oh, interesting. He's a anime guy. That would be cool. Yes, I mean, I think that, like, yeah, people often suggest this for Warhammer 40k because, you know, whilst the Horus Heresy is probably too big to ever actually tell, I definitely think you could have an animated show that is the story of Garvey Loken. That would work. I can't really see why that wouldn't work. And yeah, I think it would work really well in an animated format because, of course, Space Marines must be they must be pretty expensive to have the Tau encountered the Tyranids or Orks yet? I assume they have encountered Orks because they are everywhere. Yes, so they definitely have encountered the Orks and the Tau, and the Tyranids. So the Orks are, yes, relatively early on, and of course that's a lot of their like early spheres of expansion is fighting against the Orks, the Bagel, and they do a good job, and they, you know, Farsight literally writes the book on how to fight Orks, and he even becomes, it's one of the parts of his writing that's quite interesting, is that he even becomes relatively adept to understanding and manipulating the Orks, which is kind of a different way of tackling the Greenskin Menace, which is pretty cool. And then in terms of the Tyranids, so that's basically the plot of the latest book, where the Farsight enclaves have attacks by High Fleet Gorgon, and that High Fleet attacks them. Although weirdly, I don't think it specifies the High Fleet in the book, but it does in the Tau supplement. So the reason the Gorgon attacks them is because of the fact that the Ethereals sort of redirected the Tyranids to attack the Farsight enclaves, and of course don't provide any support, and in fact kidnap Farsight during the combat. So they're basically happy to use the Tyranids to destroy the Farsight enclaves because the Ethereals are not allowed to kill Farsight themselves, because that would be pushing the Tau back. Tau on Tau conflict is not allowed because of you would be pushing back to the time of Old Night for them, and so they're prohibited from killing Farsight, even though he is deemed a traitor to the Tau Empire. So we've got books on them fighting against both, and they are more, it's pretty common. Eldar is also a really interesting conflict for the Tau, because they do come into conflict in like codexes, it is mentioned, but of course the Tau and the Eldar have a lot of opportunity there, because the Eldar are very open to working with others races, as we see them work with not just humanity, but they're willing to enter relationships with the Cabal, etc., etc. And the Tau Empire, of course, are willing to bring everybody together. Now, by no means do I think like a craft world would join the Tau Empire, but the idea that they would ally towards a greater goal, I wouldn't put that past them, and I think that could be an interesting thing to explore in the future, especially as we do know now that the there are Votan that work within the Tau Empire. So there's definitely a lot to explore. Are the Tau in Dawn of War 4? I could probably Google it, but I'm already procrastinating. Fair enough, brother. I don't believe so. I don't believe they've been announced at all. So it's just... Yes. So on the cover art, this is basically everyone you're getting to start with. So you've got the Blood Ravens, then you've got the Orks, and you've got the Admech, and then the Necrons. And is that an Imperial Knight? But yes, I can't wait. And then, of course, the Dark Angels will be in it, but they're just in the campaign, I believe. Although you can presumably just recreate them. But yeah, no Tau. I mean, it's disappointing, but it's just sort of the way of the world nowadays. There will be a bunch of DLCs for the Dawn of War games, and the Tau Empire being within there is relatively likely, because the part of the galaxy where they are is relatively close to the Tau Empire, so that's definitely a relative likelihood. Leagues of Votan as well, I reckon there's a good chance they show up, because of course they're in the area, and then Tyranids can be anywhere. So it would definitely work. The hardest people to move across the galaxy are the Tau and like the Custodians. So there are some who are particularly like based in a certain part of the galaxy, but most people you can shift about. So I think that eventually you get DLCs for, if not all the factions, most of them. I guess it just depends how well they sell. How well do you think GHAZGHULL stacks up against Angron? It's a good question. So so basically, when it comes to GHAZGHULL's lore, of course, we can't avoid the elephant in the room, which is the fact that he had his head cut off by Ragnar Blackmane. So, and when GHAZGHULL kind of got his new model, and it was revealed that GHAZGHULL has become so much more powerful over the years, people sort of assumed that meant he was moving beyond his conflicts with Yarrick, and he was now a being of a higher level. And GHAZGHULL has always been something incredibly different. In the First War of Armageddon, what makes Yarrick stand out is the fact that he disagrees with the governor about the fact that GHAZGHULL is a proper threat, because the governor's just like, oh, it'll be fine. And that's why Hades Hive ends up being the last stronghold, is because, of course, everywhere else ends up falling to GHAZGHULL. And when GHAZGHULL captures Yarrick, for example, later on, GHAZGHULL is able to speak to Yarrick in High Gothic, which is not something I don't think any Orc has ever done. So there's something clearly very different about GHAZGHULL. Then, of course, he does fight Ragnar Blackmane, and he does defeat Ragnar. Really, he wins the fight, but in as Ragnar's impaled, Ragnar cuts his head off. This is covered in the GHAZGHULL book by Nate Crowley, and it is a bit of a shame, but it just sort of allows him to come back stronger. I'm not certain that's how I would have written it. I would have preferred a proper GHAZGHULL win, but the vibe that the book gives is that this has just made everything worse for the Imperium. GHAZGHULL is now stronger than ever. And in the book that comes after that, which is The Mad Doc by Denny Flowers, in that book, we see the Mad Doc questioning the concept of GHAZGHULL, trying to come up with ideas that could defeat GHAZGHULL. Can he make an Orc that is more powerful than GHAZGHULL? And GHAZGHULL defeats all of them. He just rips everyone apart, and even this big Orc Gene Stealer hybrid, GHAZGHULL destroys. So GHAZGHULL is definitely, the impression that it gives is that GHAZGHULL keeps growing to be more and more powerful, but he hasn't got his big win yet. He hasn't, like, this is the problem, is the fact that we can keep saying how powerful GHAZGHULL is, and it's a way they're telling us without showing us. They keep telling us that GHAZGHULL is more and more powerful, but the characters that GHAZGHULL keeps beating are characters that are not important within the setting. And so allowing him to defeat Angron, I think, would be really good for the setting. In terms of who I think would win, like, my heart says Angron would be the more powerful of the two. He is like a literal avatar of the god of war, but at the same time, I want GHAZGHULL to win. I really do, because I think it would do so much for him. It would kind of just reset the balance of the Orks, and I think it would have a genuine impact on the setting, because people would all of a sudden think like, oh, GHAZGHULL, the Orc that killed Angron. You know, that would be a massive deal. Even the Lion, you know, without the Emperor's Shield, would the Lion have beaten Angron? Probably not. So we just, it would really set GHAZGHULL up to be this monumental threat. And I hope that's what they go with in the future, because we need an Orc menace that makes us feel actually scared. Don't worry, Angron, you'll stop being the punching bag sooner or later. I mean, they're weirdly kind of both punching bags, because they both can be, resurrected, as it were, or just brought back quite quickly. And so they're always going to be punching bags themselves. It'd be cool for Case to return as the commander in Dawn of War 4, since we're returning to Cronus. Yeah, Case would be a great character to introduce. That is very true. And he's never had a model in Warhammer 40k. We don't know exactly what that model would look like, but he is definitely the part of like Phil Kelly's novels that I think people are desperate to see an expansion upon, because there's only so much you can do with Shadowsun and Farsight, I think, realistically, whereas Case is kind of this massively unexplored area of Tau lore that would, kind of change everything for the faction, to be honest. If Gaz has some weird boys backing him up, he could win. That's true. He could do it that way. But yeah, I don't know. But part of me just wants him to beat him in a straight fight. It would just be amazing. Yeah, it would be so much fun. Hopefully they do it. I mean, it's one of those things you just feel like you just want to say, like, have the guts, Games Workshop. Like Yarrick himself says, have the guts to do what has to be done, and they just don't really stick to their guns, and they back down out of doing these kind of things that would incense the fan base, but perhaps would be challenging to write. Kay's in a funny spot since he's an army of one. Yeah, he is, but then at the same time, he just sort of, that would work quite well, doesn't it? If you think about it in terms of a game or in terms of like the tabletop, you just need to have him. Like the funny thing about Tau is that the Tau will synergize, so you just have Case as like his own lone warrior unit that doesn't synergize with anybody else, but it's just like an army in and of himself. And I think that actually works quite well, because of course most of the characters in the Tau Empire are going to be like buffing characters or long range shooting characters. So having this one kind of stealthy unit that just kind of runs about and kicks ass, I think it would be pretty cool. I want a no-holds fight. They're duking it out whilst calling their underlings and artillery on each other mid-fight. Yeah, I mean, it also would be a perfect example to do something completely just ridiculous, right? You have a combat where GHAZGHULL and Yarrick are out there talking about how, GHAZGHULL is having all his boys fall back. Angron wants to fight him one-on-one. Like, it would be tactically of no use whatsoever, but of course they just want to get to Crumpet. Case basically soloed a chapter. It's wild a character that glaze doesn't have a model. Yes, you are right. I mean, and a Dark Angel successor chapter, so obviously one of the better ones. So like it's a bit nuts that he kind of pulled that off, and yet he doesn't really come up. Also, his kind of like recapture is surprisingly quick, because at the end of that book, Case disappears, War of Secrets, and Commander Surestrike, he wants to go and capture Case, and then they don't really expand upon that, but in the next Tau Codex, there are references to Case leading Tau once again, so presumably he just got captured off screen, which is a bit... if the Steel Legion is killed off, why do the Cadians get to live? They lost their whole planet. It's a good question, and the answer is because they sell better, I guess, is what Games Workshop's worried about. So, it's one of those things. It's not nice to talk about. The Steel Legion and the Krieg originally, of course, as I talked about earlier, the Steel Legion were, the Krieg were created from Steel Legion sculpts. But then, of course, they got their own models and they got their own lore and they became their own thing. And now, of course, the models look pretty different. These are both Krieg models, but like you can see, oh, here we go. You can see that the helmets are different. You can see that the jackets are different. Something like the boots are different, but that, you know, that's fixable. But mainly it's the jackets and the helmets that are going to be different. And it's one of those things where when people collect Warhammer, they collect it because all of these little details really matter to them. So the Steel Legion are World War I inspired, the Krieg are World War II inspired, and ultimately that's what people care about. And so it is just a bit of a shame, really. But I'm guessing because they're so similar, Games Workshop are worried that they wouldn't sell enough Steel Legion, and so they've kind of, I guess it's kind of a silent, but like kind of sort of a silently squatted them, which is, yeah, a real shame. Just, yeah, I guess it was a no-brainer to go with the Krieg, just because the Krieg was so much more popular. Krieg lore is, you know, even when they had like no meaningful mainstream lore and everything was in campaign books, they were still one of the most popular factions in the setting. Meta reason, Cadians are popular. Canon reason, there are a lot of them, and they were sent to fight all over the galaxy before Cadia went boom. So I will say, like, as an actual like lore reason. So in Creed's granddaughter, in her novel, her novel is based around this plot line where she is out trying to find the kind of lost weapons of Cadia, right? Supposedly these incredibly powerful weapons that Creed had left basically a treasure hunt for, and if she finds them, then she'll have this kind of ultimate weapon. At the end of the book, it's revealed that this kind of ultimate weapon is actually just a series of homeworlds, potential homeworlds for the Cadians to resettle. And so, yes, Cadia may be lost, but the Cadians now do have a series of worlds for them to restock and rebuild their numbers, as well as the fact that they are scattered throughout the galaxy already. And so that's the canon reason as to why there's so many Cadians, I guess. But yes, the meta reason is just that they are very My Army looking blokes, and they can be turned into so many. I mean, the thing is, the gas mask does make a lot of sense because, of course, so many worlds are going to be toxic and have radiation, etc. So the gas masks do really work in the 41st millennium. But yeah, the Cadians look much more kind of my guy, I guess. All these characters send their kids on fetch quests. Yeah, that's true. That's true. No one ever just like writes things in simple terms. Which, and the funny thing is about Creed is that like the idea that Abaddon or someone else would have found these potential worlds for Cadia isn't actually that important information. Like I would have allowed that to happen beforehand. And you didn't. Do you really need to wait for Cadia to be destroyed to start colonizing other worlds? Because don't you want the reinforcements anyway? And don't you want to create more Cadians as it is? So it's sort of a weird one. The Tanith had some deal where they could settle the first world they captured. Is it the same for Cadia? I don't. It doesn't really. It's not like the Tanith. No. Yeah, it's more just the fact that like he had already organized all of this, and yes, the locations of. I want to say. Yeah, it's like 5 planets or something like that. So yeah, he just kind of already decided them, but it's not just one. There's going to be a whole bunch. They need to make the Steel Legion's helmet look cooler looking, and it'd sell. Frog mouth helm would be peak. Yeah, I mean the Krieg definitely got updated over time. That is true. But the resin models were already pretty decent. Yeah, I mean these Steel Legion models. I mean, where are they going to be? They're going from like 1997 or something. They're going pretty old, and Games Workshop sold them for over 20 years. So they had a good run in that respect. But yeah, it does suck. I guess yeah, I don't know. I don't know how Steel Legion fans feel, but yeah, the truth is that people really care about the minutiae, don't they? And yeah, you got the shoulder pads as well. You're gonna have to get rid of them. The scene in Yarrick's books where he kills all the squigs and uses their teeth to make stairs and get out of the pit of GHAZGHULL's rock is so awesome. Yes, and also the attack of the rocks on in the Third War is also one of the epic moments where the Orks land and they've already got a series of fortresses just across. The Steel Legion being a color scheme just sucks. Yes, I mean it does, and I also think it's one of those things where Games Workshop, yeah, it's one of those things where I think people do feel insulted, because if you sort of try to imply that that's the way it's always been, I think it does sort of insult people. Arcadians considered mutants because of their purple eyes. So in 30k, yes. In 40k, no. So in the funny thing about Cadia is that in 30k, it's already called Cadia. So that when the word bearers get to it in First Heretic, the people there already called it Cadia, and they have purple eyes, and they are referred to as mutants. But at the same time, by the time we get to 40k, then of course they're one of the most important regiments in the galaxy and fundamental, and really they have purple eyes as a consequence of living so close to the Eye of Terror, which someone has to do. But the Imperium's intolerance of mutants is one of those things that is not consistently written. So and that's, I guess that's kind of the point, because it's kind of the point is that they have all these rules but they break them regularly. Varrock is very much upset. I imagine Pancurus is sad too. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's going to hit hard, and maybe they'll do a 180, because obviously Armageddon lore is so important to so many people. And of all of those old metal minis, obviously Valhallans appear in like a lot in the Kane books, but like the Steel Legion probably appear the most in the lore people read, like the Armageddon lore, the Yarrick lore. So it's a bit of a shame there. So it's going to take a while. Is it confirmed that the Steel Legion is gone, or is this guesswork at the moment? Yes, sorry, I should say, if I wasn't clear, it is basically an assumption, but it is. I think it's a reasonable assumption. At the very least, I'm pretty confident that they are not intending to bring the Steel Legion back, and the reason for that is because in the trailer they don't have any Steel Legion on Armageddon, and in addition to that, it's all about Yarrick's return. And Yarrick, of course, famously led the Steel Legion. So it's a real shame. Yeah, but yeah. So you're right that Games Workshop could definitely still change their mind on this and release a bunch of Steel Legion and say, hey, we never said Steel Legion had been scrapped. And to clarify, they haven't said anything, but they never do. They just sort of pretend things don't exist anymore. That's kind of how they operate, and then they just pretend that's always been the case. So this is just how Games Workshop very rarely take ownership of their retcons. Even like the Custodes lore, the very controversial lore, I was talking about this the other week, where like one thing I was really with people on was the fact that this idea where it's like you can just tell people, oh, this is the way it's always been, and sort of not, just admit it was a retcon. Do you know what I mean? So they don't really like admitting when they've changed things. And so the Steel Legion not being in the trailer is as good as a confirmation as you can get, but technically it's not a complete confirmation, if you're being honest. How did he return? Wasn't he off? So they're going to release some future lore on him, maybe actually this week, giving more details in terms of what happened to him, and hopefully we get a bunch on his how he disappeared and something on Angron and GHAZGHULL. I was going to wait for that before talking about it, but I thought it was quite funny that Yarrick has just returned and then I'm just returning to the channel, so I thought it could be a he's returned, I've returned type vibe. I don't know if I pulled that off, but there we go. Morris lore is cool. He's from the first War of Armageddon, kidnapped by the Inquisition and frozen, now awoken by the Inquisition in Dark Tides to lead the rejects. That is an epic idea for a character. Big fan. Need a Joy Toy figure of him. Yeah, I'm sure. I don't know how quickly they turn things around, Wraithmace, but like it's normally pretty quick, right? Normally they create a new Joy Toy model within, I feel like it's months sometimes, you know, like even the Primarchs. I was quite surprised. They're just gonna gaslight through all of Dawn's skeleton retcons. Yes, true. Yeah, it's not like they ever released an article and said, oh, by the way, we changed the lore here. They just sort of pretended the old lore didn't exist. In 12th edition, nobody will stay dead. We need to admit the characters dying is kind of essential for a story to have any meaningful stakes. I get where you come from. I do, yeah. I think that Yarrick would have been a decent character to die. As much as he's the fan favorite, I guess that's sort of the point. In the same way that it would be a good idea to kill a Primarch. You know, it probably would add a lot to the setting, but Games Workshop like money, so damn it. Anyway, thanks so much, everybody. I am properly back now, so I'll be streaming again on Sunday, and I have got a video that I'm just doing the final proof watch of now, so hopefully that will be out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. Thank you so much to everybody that gave me the kind words in the stream, and it's nice to be back. Thanks so much to all the channel members who are supporting the channel, and I will see you guys later this week. Thanks for watching this stream. If you could help me appease YouTube's machine spirit by liking and subscribing, I would greatly appreciate it. If you couldn't make the stream live but want to ask me a question anyway, consider posting it in our community tab and I'll answer it next time. To support the channel, click the join button below, which will give you access to more content, and you can drop into the members Discord where all the coolest Terrans hang out, away from the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. Thanks for joining me, and until next time, I wait for you and I forgive you. Good night.